In this video, I'm going to show you how to take the Creality K1 Series machines from a very unlevel and warped bed to something very stable and fairly easy to replicate. Any parts that you need in this will be in the Amazon affiliate links down below in the description. Also, before you do this mod does require a separate probe from the load cells. I've done another video showing you how to replace the probe on the K1 Series machines. So in the last video, I went ahead and I changed out the probe for the BGT Eddy. Now I need to make sure that I deal with the way that the bed actually levels and the bed warping itself. So why does the bed actually warp in the K1 Series machines? Well, a lot like other printers, the build plate itself actually sits on top of a heat plate. Now the heat plate is designed out of a piece of stamped material that's rather thin, and it doesn't have enough mass to fight against thermal warp. Now, when the heater actually heats up, this thin build plate tends to want to warp and fluctuate, and that's no good. It doesn't really help us in the long term when we're trying to get a good, solid, even layer. So how do we fix that? Well, you can get online and you can get something like an expensive machined aluminum plate, but I wanted something simpler and just as effective. So what do? If you've been 3D printing for a while, you'll notice this. This is the Creality glass bed, which is notoriously replaced for something more like a PEI sheet. Now, we can use this to our advantage by modifying the printer. We don't want to print on this, but what we do want to do is we want to use it to make sure that our bed is no longer warping from the build plate itself. So why glass? Now, glass is known for being incredibly flat, but also very thermal stable, which means when the glass is applied to a heat plate, as the heat plate heats up, the glass still remains thermally stable. And this gives you a nice even surface for a build area. But we don't want to print on glass. As you could probably see, there's fingerprints and everything on this. And these plates are notorious for having problems with bed adhesion. And that's one of the reasons that PEI and magnetic sheets and stuff like that have become so popular. But we can use this to our advantage still. So the Creality B plate, if you have a K1 series machines, there's a good chance that you've already bought one of these. And if you've already bought one of these, they come with the magnet sheet. And we're going to use this in line with the glass bed to give us a perfectly flat area to print on. And this is going to make sure that the heat plate itself isn't moving around and we have thermal resistance when it comes to warping, but we still have the PEI sheet, which everybody loves to print on. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how we're going to get that in. So when it comes to leveling itself, that's a totally different topic, and that really has nothing to do with the thermal stability of the build plate itself. That has more to do with the Z-screws and the platform that the plate is actually on. Now, the way we solve that is with something like this, bed springs and knobs. Now, this knob kit is $9 where I'm at off of Amazon. And it just so happens that these knobs fit perfectly under here without causing any issues or interfering with the frame itself. So that's how we're going to go ahead and level the build plate itself. We're going to use these. I'm going to go ahead and show you how right now. So the first thing you want to do is you want to home your printer. And after you've homed your printer, we want to take the build frame. We want to move that about halfway into the printer itself. Now this is about halfway, we can go ahead and just turn our printer off for a while. So now that the printer's off, we're going to go ahead and remove the sheet here from the magnet. Just set that aside. We don't need that for quite a while. I've already modified this printer, so the steps are going to be a little different, but they're relatively the same. There's going to be 4 screws right here. Directly under the 4 screws, there's 4 plastic standoffs. And then underneath the frame right here, there's 4 opposing screws, which holds those standoffs on. So we need to remove the top screws, pull the plate off, and then remove the standoffs and the bottom screws. So the first thing we're going to do, go ahead and move your tool head over to the side and get that out of the way. As long as you're gentle with it, you're not going to hurt that tool head, so don't worry about that. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the screws. Now mine are through, but yours won't be. Yours will be to the standoffs. So now that the screws are actually removed from the top of the heat plate, what we want to do is move the tool head back here, and we're going to move the heat plate itself. Now we need to be a little bit careful because there are wires connected to the bottom of the heat plate and we don't want to damage those. But as long as you're gentle, it's going to be okay. So move the heat plate just ever so slightly. What we're going to do is stand it up over here on its edge. Now we're going to take the actual tool head and lightly bring it over just to hold that plate up. Now you can see the 4 plastic standoffs right here from where we removed the screws. Let's go ahead and pull those out. There may be a chance that they fell down inside your printer, which is quite common. But once you've collected all those, we can go on to the next step. So now that we removed the screws and the standoffs, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and lay the build plate back down. There are 2 screws in the back of the heat plate that are used to index the build surface, and you can see the notches in your build surface that index into these 2 screws back here. With the glass bed mod, we can't use that, so we need to modify the way the actual build plate indexes. Since we need to change the way that the build plate indexes with the glass bed mod, this right here is a new back channel that goes on the back of the heat plate itself. And we're going to use these screws that we just removed into the back of this channel. Now these screws are going to screw into the heat plate from the bottom, which means it's still useful and we're just repurposing how they work. So get those screws just barely sticking out of the back channel there. Now this channel is actually on printables.com, as well as a walkthrough on how to do this. So here we go. We're just putting that screw barely sticking out the back. Now, I know it may be difficult to see, but you want to make sure that the bottom of that back channel is flush perfectly against the heat plate itself. Now that you have the standoffs off, the next thing you want to do is you want to take a drill gun with a drill bit and ever so slightly drill the threads out. Now, why do we do this? We need to make sure that the screws themselves pass freely through the standoffs. And just like that, we have our spacers for our knobs. So in this case right here from Amazon, you have your screws, you have your springs, you have silicone, and you have your knobs themselves. I tend to use the springs, but some people prefer the silicone. Now, this part is a little more difficult to do, especially with a camera. I'm going to try not to block the view. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we put the back screws on first, especially this back right corner. So at this point, we're going to take our screw and put it in the back right corner. Now that it's in the back right corner, we need to put that spring over it. Just kind of hold it with your index finger. And we could drop the screw into the other side. Try to drop that screw through the hole where our standoff was on the right side. And we'll do the same over here, the left side. There we go. We can see a little better this way. And now those screws are actually indexed to the center of the load cells. So we can go ahead and do the front now. Same thing. Just drop your screws through. And we'll go ahead and put the springs over the screws. The front is considerably easier than the back, and it's not that difficult as long as you're not recording with a camera trying to stay out of the way. And there we go. So now that we have our screws in the correct location, we're going to use our standoffs that we had earlier. So these standoffs right here, we just pass a drill bit through very slowly to make sure that we got rid of the threads, because we need this standoff to pass over the screws without locking on. So we'll push down on this corner, place the standoff on, hold it with our thumb, and we're going to put on the knobs. Just give it a decent spin, and the knob is on. Same here, squeeze it down, put the standoff on, then we can spin our knob on. We'll make sure that we do that to the back as well. Okay, so all our screws and all our knobs are on. At this point, what we want to make sure we do is we want to bottom out the springs. We don't want to over tighten anything. We just want to compress and bottom out the springs at this point. So go ahead and screw your knob until you feel the spring bottom out. We're not trying to tighten anything. We're just bottoming out the build plate. There we go. Everything's bottomed out. Okay, so now we've turned the printer back on and we need to heat the bed up to 80 degrees so we can pull this magnet sheet off. Now I've gone ahead and I've set the bed to 50 degrees and began pulling it off to show you why. What happens is if the magnet sheet is not pliable, it starts to break and chip apart, which makes it more difficult to pull the magnet sheet off. So you need to make sure that the magnet sheet is at 80 degrees with the bed so you can peel it off. With the bed heated, it's the best way to pull the sheet off. Now you can see when the bed's heated, the magnet sheet doesn't tend to break in half like it does if you do it below temperature. So it's the best way. It just unfortunately isn't always comfortable to do it this way. And just like that, the sheet's off. Now that our heat plate is turned off and the printer's off and everything's cooled down, we can go ahead and use some alcohol and something like a glass cleaning paper towel to clean off any residue that's on the heat plate. Now, if you make sure that you do the magnet at least 80 degrees, you shouldn't have any issues with residue. You might have a little bit, but it's still a good idea to go ahead and wipe down the heat plate. Now the heat plate's wiped down, so we can go ahead and move the printer out of the way. We're not going to need that for a moment. We're going to switch gears here. We're going to take the textured side of the plate right here and wipe that down with alcohol. Make sure there's no oil or fingerprints or anything like that all over it. Make sure you use a material that's not going to leave a bunch of fibers or anything behind on the glass. When we're doing this, you want to make sure that you roll the magnet sheet on. We don't want to lay it flat. That's going to leave bubbles, and we don't want bubbles or anything like that in our build surface. So peel back just a little bit, not a lot, about that much. And make sure that you kind of, on the side where you still have the adhesive covering, you kind of line it up and get a good idea of where it's going. Then, now we have that lined up with the plate, and we can go ahead and start pulling the adhesive covering slowly. As you pull it, you want to stop and make sure that you slowly press down from the front towards the back so we don't get any air bubbles in it. Pull a little more, and then again, press down. We've gone ahead and put our magnet sheet on, so we need to make sure that there are no air bubbles or anything like that. So go ahead and inspect the sheet. Feel around, look around. The lower down you get, the easier it is to see if there's any air bubbles or anything like that. And it looks like we are perfectly fine. The next step is the 3M double-sided adhesive sheet. It's very important to take this step patiently and to pay attention. You damn near only get one shot at doing this correctly, so you want to make sure that you take your time and you're patient. It's very similar to the way that we applied the sheet on the actual front, the magnet sheet. But on the underside, what we're going to do, this is going to be overlap. So lining it up isn't exactly important. We just need to make sure that we roll it on without any bubbles. Kind of hold it up in the air and get your edge pressed down so there's no bubbles. You can see right there how easy it was. Had a little bit of a bubble, but I'll show you how to get that bubble out here in a second. You cannot pull this sheet off and try again. The next thing we want to do is grab a razor knife and right along this edge, we want to make sure that we put the razor knife against the glass and follow the edge of that glass and cut that 3M sheet. This stuff's really sticky, so whatever you do, don't set it down on something. It is very difficult to put the sheet on in the beginning without having one or two bubbles in the adhesive. I'm going to show you the way to get rid of those. What you want to do is take a razor knife and very slightly cut it in the center where that bubble is. And that's going to allow us to push the air out through that cut. So now that our sheet is ready, we need to go ahead and drop it in here on top the heat plate. So you can start by peeling the 3M adhesive off. So with your hands on the side of the glass build plate, what we want to do is make sure that the two notches actually go towards the back inside the channel. Be very careful not to allow the adhesive to drop down on top of the aluminum plate. Hold it up and index it inside that indexing channel. Make sure you firmly push it back. We don't need to force it. As long as it's inside, just give it a firm little push and then slowly lay the glass plate down. Apply a little bit of even pressure from the back towards the front. And now we should be able to easily drop on our new PEI build plate, indexed perfectly in the back channel. So now we're pretty much done with the glass sub bed mod. Now what you want to do at this point is take your printer and turn it on and heat it up to about 100 degrees on the bed and let it sit for about 30 minutes. And what this is going to do is it's going to let the adhesive bond between the glass and the heat plate. Just let it sit there, and after about 30 minutes, turn it off, let it cool all the way down before you start doing your bed mesh. You want to heat it up to the printing temperature that you expect your bed to be at, and then start doing your bed mesh. Now, once you do your bed mesh, you'll see at what point you need to turn your knobs to level your bed. And just run your bed mesh a few times until you get your bed exactly level how you want it to be. So with the glass bed installed, another option that's been open to us is the Creality machines have these notches to index into the old screws. But with the new back channel, you can use any plates you want, provided that it fits. We just fit that right into the back channel and drop it down. So there you go, the Creality K1 Series machines glass bed mod. And at this point, we're done.